Hey everyone, today I'm going to be making a metal archway for my garden. So I'm just going to jump right in. First thing I did was sketch on the ground here a life-size version of the arch so I can lay the metal right on top of the arch so that I can make sure that I get the exact shape that I want before I start welding everything together and it becomes too late. I'm going to be using 1-inch square tubing. I've measured the distance of the arc and I've cut the piece of tubing to that length. And then I've gone ahead and marked 3 spots on the tubing where the curve begins and then the center, so that as I'm bending it and laying it on top of this, I sort of have some reference points that I can then make smaller adjustments. I made this square tubing pipe bender, and so I can just slide this over, line it up where I want to start the bending. There's a pretty abrupt bend, and then just a bunch of gentle curves. So I'm at the halfway point and it should roughly be vertical at this point. So I'll just keep going. So then I'll just lay it down on top of the drawing and I can go ahead and start to make the subtle adjustments to match the correct arc. To unbend a little bit, if I've overbent it, I can just send one leg through the vise. Then just choose the point of contact on the ground that I want to unbend, and just a little bit of pressure with this much leverage will actually move the metal quite a bit. I'll just get one side lined up and then work my way around. So I've got the first leg lined up, and then where I'm a little bit off, I can just come with just some normal chalk and just mark where I want to tweak it. That way, when I stick it through this, I'll know which part to unbend. And it's a lot of back and forth testing. Bend it a little bit, test it, bend it a little bit. I can just wipe off the chalk once it's good, and then I'm just following the line to where it leaves it again. Okay, I think that's good for this one, so I'll go ahead and knock out the other 3. So I got all 4 arches shaped, which allowed me to make a couple test scrolls, which I used to just test fit in here, make sure I got the right size, and then that allowed me to count up the approximate amount of scrolls I'll need to make for the front and back piece. I think I'm going to need about 120 scrolls, so I'll show you how I make a few of them and then I'll just knock out the rest. So for these scrolls I'm going to use 1/8 by 1/2 inch flat, or that's 3 by 12, and I know that these need to be 27.5 inches long, which is about 700 mil. And just stick them in a scroll bender. There we go. So I'll do one more. All right, and then they'll just fit together perfectly. So let me go ahead and knock out the rest. Okay, so that's about 120 scrolls, and then I've got the 4 arches, so I've got enough to start putting this together. What I'll do is I'll move 2 of these off. I'll keep a big and a small arch, and I can start filling in the scroll work. I'll get going with that right now. So first I have these 5 scraps that are cut to the length of the distance between the 2 pieces of tubing that I want. In this case, it's 9 inches, and what I'm going to do is just at 5 points, go ahead and weld them so that spacing is permanently set. I can then do the layout of the scrolls and then just remove the scraps once I get everything welded up together. So I'll put these out first. So now I can lay the scrolls out into the arch, get the pattern just right, and then just go around and tack it all together. Okay, this one's done for now, so I'll stand it up and move it out of the way, and I'll put the next one together. So I finished both arches now, and what I'll do next is I have these 14-inch or 350 mil spacers that I'll go ahead and weld onto one of them, tip it up, and then I can bring the second one in, weld it to the spacers, and then they will be spaced out the appropriate distance from each other, and then I can go ahead and fill them in with scrolls. So I'll get these tacked on now. So now I'll stand this up. I've got clamps ready, I've got the welder ready. This arch is up, it's tied off with a safety rope, and I'm just gonna walk this second arch into place, clamp it, and then tack it onto these. Then it should be nice and stable and ready to move on to the next step. Okay, so now I'll tack these all together. Now I'll pull the clamps off and I can start working on the scrolls that connect these 2 together. I'm going to do the same pattern on the outsides of the arch as this pattern here. So I just made a bunch of these bigger scrolls. There's 30 of these, which is 1/8 by half or 3 by 12. And then there's 3 of these big ones, which is 1/4 by 3/4 or 6 by 19. And these 3 big ones I'll place one right around here, one at the top, and then one here, and then there will be some bars for mounting it down. So these really add a lot more structure to the whole thing than the thinner ones, but once it's all welded together, it should be locked in pretty tight. All right, so now I'll just start adding the scrolls from here going out. So I'll start with one of the thick ones. I'll just use the horn of the anvil here to give it a bit of a bend. Just enough to match this curve of the arch. Okay, that's good. And then I've marked off the center top of the arch, so I know where the 2 scrolls need to meet to have the 2 different angles coming off the pattern. Once that's tacked in, I can just sort of tweak anything to make sure it's following the right line, and then I'll just fill in those sides. So I've got all the side scrolls put in, so now first thing I'm just going to stand it up. So now I can remove all these temporary spacers, and then I've got a few pieces to weld into the bottom. They're basically feet, and they're pre-drilled to be able to bolt it down when I install it. So I'll go ahead and cut these out, weld these in. Now I can cut out the temporary supports. Okay, so I'll just grind these spots nice and flat now, and then I'll go ahead and put a coat of paint on it. Just a coat of heavy duty metal paint. I'll just roll on most of it, and then I'll come back and I'll brush in the bits that I can't get with the roller. Okay, so I finished painting it. It's dried overnight and it's ready to take outside now and install it. So this is it installed. I'm going to add a couple handrails here on the sides and some climbing roses to grow up over. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more like this in the future, and thanks for watching.